The windows rattled first, a low, predatory vibration that crawled up through the foundation of Seattle General Hospital, making coffee cups dance on the nurses' station counter. Then the sound hit, a bone-deep thunder that didn't belong in a civilian sky. 4 matte-black Blackhawk helicopters tore through the clouds at a tight combat formation, descending on the hospital parking lot like birds of prey dropping on their kill. Car alarms shrieked, pedestrians scattered, security guards sprinted toward the landing zone, radios crackling with panicked demands for backup that wouldn't come fast enough. The skids hadn't even touched asphalt when the doors burst open. Marines poured out in full tactical gear, plate carriers loaded with magazines, helmets with night vision mounts, weapons that had seen action in places the news never mentioned. They moved with the synchronized precision of men who'd breached hostile compounds together, ignoring the security team's shouted warnings, ignoring the hospital administrator who came running with his clipboard like it was a shield. Their captain, a broad-shouldered man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, didn't slow down. He didn't ask for the director. He didn't ask for the chief of surgery. He stormed straight through the automatic doors into the emergency room, his boots leaving muddy prints on the pristine floor, and his voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "We need Angel 6. Where the hell is Angel 6?" The entire ER froze. Paula Powell knew that floor intimately. The speckled gray linoleum of Seattle General's emergency department had become her world, a small, contained universe where she kept her head down and her mouth shut. At 40 years old, she had perfected the art of invisibility. She was the nurse who moved slowly through the hallways, her left leg creating an uneven rhythm that marked her as broken to everyone who bothered to notice. She was the one they called when a bedpan needed changing, when discharge paperwork needed filing, when someone needed to babysit the drunks who stumbled in smelling of cheap whiskey and bad decisions. To the trauma surgeons sprinting past her, Paula was furniture, functional, forgettable, and slightly damaged. "Powell, you're in the way," Dr. Ronald Tanner's voice dripped with impatience as he shouldered past her, not even slowing down. Tanner was Seattle General's golden boy, the trauma surgeon with the perfect record, the magazine cover smile, and the God complex to match. His scrubs were always pressed, his hair always perfect, his confidence always absolute. Paula caught herself on the edge of the supply cart, her left leg held together by titanium pins and surgical scars that spiderwebbed up to her hip, sending a familiar spike of pain through her body. "Sorry, doctor," her voice barely audible over the ER's constant noise. "Don't be sorry, be useful." Tanner didn't even look back. "We've got a mass casualty event incoming, multi-vehicle pileup on I-5. If you can't keep up, maybe you should request a transfer to records. They sit down a lot in records." A couple of the younger residents snickered. They orbited Tanner like moons around a star, absorbing his arrogance, mimicking his cruelty. To them, Paula was a cautionary tale. What happened when you stayed too long, when your body gave out before your career did. Paula adjusted the trauma bag on her shoulder and went back to restocking gauze pads. She didn't flinch at the insult. She'd been insulted by men far more terrifying than Dr. Tanner. She'd been screamed at by drill instructors in the muggy hell of basic training. She'd been cursed at by wounded soldiers in firefights where the air tasted like copper and burning fuel. Tanner's ego was the buzzing of a mosquito compared to the roar of a .50. But she kept that to herself. Here, she was just Paula, not Lieutenant Commander Powell, not Navy Flight Nurse Powell, and certainly not the call sign that had been buried in a classified file 7 years ago, the day her helicopter went down in the mountains of Afghanistan. "Hey, Paula," Sarah, a kind but perpetually frazzled junior nurse, whispered as she hurried past with an armful of IV bags. "Don't listen to him. He's just stressed because there's some VIP in the pileup, senator's kid or something. The board's lighting up." "It's fine," Paula said quietly, but her eyes were already scanning the ER with a precision that went completely unnoticed. While everyone else saw chaos, a blur of gurneys, shouting doctors, and beeping monitors, Paula saw patterns. She saw that bed 4's blood pressure was dropping before the alarm went off. She saw that the intern in bed 7 was about to blow the intubation. She saw the tremor in Tanner's hand as he barked orders, the telltale sign that he'd skipped breakfast again, and his blood sugar was crashing. She saw everything. She always had. That's when the windows started to rattle.
The tremor in the windows intensified, and Paula's hand stilled over the gauze packets. That sound, that specific frequency of rotor blades cutting through air, triggered something deep in her nervous system, a primal response that 7 years of civilian life hadn't managed to erase. Her pulse didn't spike. Instead, it steadied, dropping into the combat calm rhythm she'd trained her body to adopt when everything went sideways. Dr. Tanner was in the middle of his third monologue of the morning, this one directed at a terrified medical student. And if you can't identify a tension pneumothorax within 30 seconds of initial presentation, you have no business in my ER. This isn't medical school anymore. This is Dr. Tanner? Paula's voice cut through his lecture, quiet but carrying an edge that made several nurses look up. Bed 9, the motorcycle accident from this morning. Tanner's jaw tightened. He hated being interrupted, especially by her. What about bed 9, Powell? I've already assessed him. Fractured clavicle, road rash, possible concussion. He's stable and waiting for ortho. His breath sounds are diminished on the right side. Tracheal deviation to the left. JVD is starting to present. Paula kept her voice level, clinical. He's developing a tension pneumothorax. He's fine. Tanner didn't even glance at the patient's monitors. I examined him 20 minutes ago. His chest x-ray was clear. 20 minutes ago, he was fine. He's not fine now. The medical student shifted uncomfortably. Sarah had stopped mid-stride, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Nobody challenged Tanner. It was an unspoken rule of Seattle General's ER. You didn't question the golden boy, not if you wanted to keep your job. Tanner's face flushed red. He took 2 steps toward Paula, using his height to loom over her. Let me make something crystal clear, Powell. I don't need a nurse, especially one who can barely walk, telling me how to practice medicine. If you spent half as much time doing your actual job as you do playing doctor, maybe you'd— The crash cart alarm from bed 9 cut him off mid-sentence. Paula was already moving, her uneven gait eating up the distance faster than anyone expected. The motorcycle victim was gasping, his lips turning blue, his eyes rolling back. His chest had stopped moving on the right side entirely. Needle decompression kit, Paula barked, her hands already positioning the patient, finding the landmark between his second and third ribs. Sarah appeared with the kit, her hands shaking as she tore it open. Tanner rushed over, his face now pale instead of red. What are you— Powell, step back, I'll handle. Paula's hand shot out, catching his wrist with enough force to stop him cold. For just a moment, her eyes met his, and something in her gaze made the arrogant surgeon take an involuntary step backward. It was a look that didn't belong in a civilian hospital. It was the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd made life or death decisions in places where hesitation meant body bags. You missed it, Paula said flatly. Now stay out of my way. She plunged the needle into the patient's chest. The hiss of escaping air was immediate and dramatic. The patient's color began improving within seconds, his breathing resuming with desperate, grateful gasps. The ER had gone silent. Everyone was staring. Tanner opened his mouth, probably to reclaim authority with some dismissive comment, when the front doors exploded inward with a boom that made everyone jump. The Marines poured in like a flood, weapons not quite pointed at anyone, but definitely not lowered. They moved with the coordinated efficiency of a breaching team, their boots thunderous on the linoleum, their presence transforming the sterile hospital into something that felt like a war zone. The captain, his name tape read Thorne, scanned the room with tactical precision, his eyes cataloging every person, every exit, every potential threat. When his gaze landed on Paula, everything about his posture changed. His weapon immediately lowered. His expression shifted from combat alert to something that looked almost like relief. Lieutenant Commander Powell, it wasn't a question. Angel 6. Paula felt every eye in the ER turn to her. She straightened slowly, her left leg protesting, but her spine locked into the military bearing that she'd spent 7 years trying to forget. Captain, her voice had changed too. The quiet, apologetic tone was gone, replaced with something harder. I'm retired. Not anymore, ma'am. Thorne crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. Up close, Paula could see the combat patches on his plate carrier. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. This wasn't some parade ground Marine. This was a door kicker who'd seen the elephant and lived. We have a situation. Cascade Mountains, 70 miles northeast. A covert unit hit an ambush 30 minutes ago. We've got 1 critical casualty, catastrophic injuries. He's not going to make it to a hospital. Then get him on a bird and bring him here. Dr. Tanner's the best trauma surgeon in the city. Paula gestured toward Tanner, who looked like he was watching a play performed in a language he didn't understand. Negative, ma'am. The package is General Taylor's son, Corporal Matthew Sterling, and he asked for you specifically. Said if anyone's going to crack his chest in the middle of a firefight, it's Angel 6. The name hit Paula like a physical blow. General Cornet Taylor, her former commanding officer, the man who'd pinned the Navy Cross on her chest in a ceremony she could barely remember through the morphine haze. The man whose recommendation letter got her into Seattle General's nursing program when the Navy wouldn't clear her for flight status anymore. I can't, Paula started, but her voice faltered. She glanced down at her left leg, at the way her scrub pants couldn't quite hide the unnatural stiffness below her knee. You can, Thorne stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. I read your file, Commander. I know what happened in Kandahar. I know what you did to get your crew out. I know why you limp. He paused, letting that sink in. And I know that right now there's a 22-year-old kid bleeding out in a crashed Osprey, and every doctor on this base said he was already dead. But he's not yet, and he won't be if you're there. Paula's hands were shaking now, not from fear, from memory. The smell of burning fuel, the screaming, the feeling of her legs shattering as the helicopter hit the ground. The choice she made to drag her crew out one by one, even though her femur was sticking through her flight suit. Powell? Tanner's voice was small, confused. What is he talking about? What file? Paula didn't answer him. Instead, she reached up and unclipped her hospital ID badge from her scrub top. She turned to Tanner, meeting his eyes, and for the first time since she'd started working at Seattle General, she saw something other than arrogance in his expression. She saw uncertainty, fear even. She pressed the badge into his palm. Bed 9 is going to crash again in about 90 minutes. His lung is going to recollapse. When it does, don't hesitate with the chest tube this time.
And Bed 4, the elderly woman with the hip fracture, she's bleeding internally. Her hemoglobin's been dropping for the last hour. You've been so focused on the pileup patients, you never noticed. Tanner stared at her like she'd started speaking in tongues. Paula leaned closer. I've been doing your job while you've been playing God, Doctor. Every critical catch you've made in the last 6 months, I saw it first. I just let you take the credit because I didn't need the glory. But that kid in Bed 9 almost died because you were too arrogant to listen. She paused. Do better. Then she turned to Thorne. Where's the bird? Parking lot, ma'am. We're wheels up in 3 minutes. Paula nodded once and started for the door, her limp suddenly looking less like a weakness and more like the gait of someone who'd earned every painful step. The Marines fell in around her like an honor guard, and as they moved through the ER, Paula heard someone whisper, "What the hell just happened?" Sarah, bless her heart, whispered back, "I think we just met someone we never actually knew." The Blackhawks' interior smelled exactly how Paula remembered. Jet fuel, hydraulic fluid, and the indefinable scent of controlled violence.
They'd brought her flight gear, somehow. Her old bag, the one she'd thought was lost in the crash. Someone had kept it in storage all these years, kept it ready. Paula's hands moved on autopilot, stripping out of her scrubs in the cramped space, pulling on the flame-resistant flight suit that still fit perfectly. The crew chief, a young corporal who looked like he should still be in high school, averted his eyes respectfully, but Thorne watched her with a clinical assessment of a combat leader evaluating his assets. "Can you rope with that leg?" he asked bluntly, gesturing at her prosthetic as she pulled on her flight boots. The left one fit differently now, accommodating the titanium and carbon fiber that had replaced everything below her knee. "Can you shoot left-handed?" Paula countered, noticing the way he favored his right side. "Took shrapnel in my shoulder in Fallujah. Doesn't stop me from pulling a trigger." "Then my leg won't stop me from roping." Paula cinched the last strap on her vest. The smell of the jet fuel was stronger now, mixing with the metallic tang of the weapons, and suddenly she was back in that burning helicopter in the Hindu Kush, flames licking at her face, her legs shattered, her crew screaming. Her breath hitched. "Commander." Thorne's voice was steady, grounding. Paula closed her eyes, forcing the memory back into its box. "How bad is the LZ?" "It's not an LZ. It's a vertical ravine they call the Devil's Throat. 60-foot rope insertion, no room for the bird to set down. The Osprey went in hard. Pilot's dead, co-pilot's critical but stable. Sterling took the worst of it, massive chest trauma. He's been unconscious for 20 minutes. Time to target? 12 minutes. Paula pulled her flight helmet on, feeling the familiar weight settle onto her head. Through the open door, she could see Seattle General disappearing behind them, the hospital getting smaller and smaller. Somewhere down there, Tanner was probably still standing in the ER, holding her ID badge, trying to process what had just happened. She hoped he'd listen about Bed 4. He hoped he'd learn something. But that was his problem now. She had a different job to do. Thorne handed her a headset, and the moment it clicked on, she heard the controlled chaos of the tactical net. Multiple call signs reporting in, coordinates being confirmed, a cool female voice running overwatch from somewhere high above. "Angel 6, this is Raven Actual." The voice belonged to someone used to command. "We have eyes on the crash site. Heavy mercenary presence, approximately 15 hostiles. They're searching the Osprey. We believe they're after classified materials Sterling was transporting. Be advised, you're inserting into an active firefight." Paula keyed her mic. "Angel 6, this is Raven Actual. Understood. What's Sterling's status?" A pause. Then, "Vitals are barely there. Pulse thready, BP dropping. He's minutes out from bleeding out, possibly internal. The cordman on site has exhausted his capabilities." "Then I guess I'd better hurry." Paula glanced at Thorne. "I'll need a full trauma kit, and I mean full. Chest tubes, clamps, sutures, the works. If I'm doing this in the field, I'm doing it right." "Already loaded, ma'am, plus enough firepower to hold off a small army." "Good." Paula turned to look out the open door as the Blackhawk banked hard, following the terrain. Below them, the urban sprawl of Seattle had given way to dense forest, and ahead, she could see the jagged peaks of the Cascades rising like teeth. Somewhere in those mountains, General Taylor's son was dying. And somewhere in Paula's chest, buried under 7 years of quiet civilian life, Angel 6 was waking up. The crew chief held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. Paula checked her rope harness, tested the clips, and felt her body remembering the 1,000 times she'd done this before. The leg would slow her down. It would hurt, but pain was just information, and she'd learned long ago how to sort the useful data from the noise. "Commander?" Thorne was watching her again, his expression hard to read. "For what it's worth, the entire unit knows your story, what you did in Kandahar, how you got your crew out. You're a legend to us." "Legends are just people who didn't die when they should have," Paula said quietly. Then she clipped into the rope. "Let's make sure Sterling doesn't become one today." The helicopter dropped into the ravine like a stone, and Paula's world contracted to the essentials, the rope in her hands, the wind tearing at her, the ground rushing up from below. The Devil's Throat was aptly named, a vertical slash in the earth where 2 cliff faces met in a narrow, jagged embrace.
At the bottom, twisted and broken, the Osprey lay like a dead bird, smoke still rising from its engines. And around it, muzzle flashes, lots of them. Paula kicked off the skid and dropped into hell, her prosthetic leg absorbing the impact in a way that her flesh and blood knee never could have. She hit the ground in a tactical crouch, the trauma bag already off her shoulder, her eyes scanning for Sterling. She found him in the Osprey's crushed crew compartment, and her heart sank. The kid was barely holding on, and she had minutes, not hours, to do the impossible. Time to remember who Angel 6 really was. The Osprey's interior was a nightmare of twisted metal and blood. Corporal Matthew Sterling lay sprawled across the deck, his body armor shredded, his chest rising in shallow, irregular gasps that Paula recognized immediately. She'd seen that breathing pattern before, in Kandahar, in Fallujah, in a dozen other places where young men learned that courage couldn't stop bullets. "I've done everything I can, packed the wounds, started fluids, but his pressure keeps dropping. I think he's bleeding internally." Paula dropped to her knees beside Sterling, her hands already moving through the rapid assessment she could do in her sleep. Airway patent but compromised, breathing inadequate, circulation failing. His skin is gray, lips blue, and when she pressed her fingers to his neck, his pulse felt like a butterfly struggling to escape. "How long has he been unconscious?" 30 minutes. He was alert after the crash, but then he just... The cordman's voice cracked. "He asked for you. Said his dad told him about Angel 6. Said if he was dying, you were the only one who could bring him back."
Paula's jaw tightened. She ripped open Sterling's flight suit, exposing his chest. The bruising was massive, deep purple spreading across his left side, the telltale sign of significant internal trauma. She pressed her stethoscope to his chest and heard what she'd feared. Muffled heart sounds, distended neck veins, Beck's triad, cardiac tamponade, blood filling the sac around his heart, choking it, stopping it from beating effectively. "I need to crack his chest," Paula said, her voice cutting through the chaos of gunfire outside. "Here, now." The corpsman's face went white. "Here? But we need a hospital. We need to do it now, or he's dead in 5 minutes." Paula was already yanking supplies from her trauma bag, scalpel, rib spreaders, clamps. The instruments looked obscene in the crude light filtering through the Osprey's shattered windows. "This is a field thoracotomy. I'm going to open his chest and drain the blood crushing his heart. Then I'm going to massage it manually until we can get him to an OR." "That's insane," the corpsman whispered. That's something they do in war zones. This is a war zone." Paula's hands were steady as she positioned the scalpel. "And this is what SEALs do when there's no other option. It's called damage control surgery. I've done it 3 times. Twice, the patient lived." She didn't mention that the third one had died in her hands. The incision was brutal and necessary. Paula cut through skin and muscle with the precision of someone who'd learned anatomy from textbooks and refined it in the field. Blood welled up immediately, but she'd expected that. She wedged the rib spreaders into place and cranked them open, exposing Sterling's chest cavity to the dim light. There it was, the pericardial sac, distended and purple with blood. "Clamp," Paula barked. The corpsman slapped it into her palm. She pierced the sac carefully, releasing a gush of dark blood, and immediately Sterling's heart began beating more strongly, but not strongly enough. She could see the lacerations in the muscle itself, blood still seeping from a torn vessel. Paula didn't hesitate. She reached into his chest and wrapped her hand around his heart. The sensation was surreal, feeling a human heart in her palm, feeling it struggle and flutter. She began to squeeze rhythmically, manually pumping blood through her body, her other hand working to clamp the bleeding vessel. It was brutal, primitive medicine. It was also the only thing keeping him alive. "Get the pilot on the radio," Paula said, her voice steady even as her arms began to burn with the effort. "Tell them we need immediate evac, and I'm going to need to keep my hand in his chest the entire flight." The corpseman stared at her like she'd lost her mind, but he keyed his radio. Paula focused on the rhythm. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release. Sterling's color was already improving, pink returning to his lips. His heart was fighting back, trying to beat on its own, but it wasn't strong enough yet. That's when the first mercenary appeared at the Osprey's door. He was dressed in black tactical gear with no identifying patches, his weapon up and ready. His eyes widened when he saw Paula kneeling in Sterling's blood, her hand literally inside his chest. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Thorne's rifle barked from somewhere outside, and the mercenary dropped. "Contact!" someone screamed over the tactical net. "Multiple hostiles closing on the Osprey!" Paula didn't flinch. She kept massaging Sterling's heart, kept him alive through sheer will and muscle memory. Around her, the world exploded into chaos. Thorne and his Marines had formed a perimeter, but the mercenaries were closing in, drawn by whatever classified material Sterling had been carrying. The corpseman grabbed an M4 from the deck and took up a position at the door, firing in controlled bursts. Bullet impacts rang off the Osprey's hull like deadly rain. "Angel 6, we need to move you!" Thorne's voice crackled in her ear. "They're bringing up an RPG!" "I can't move!" Paula shouted back, her hand still working, still squeezing. "If I stop, he dies! If you stay, you both die!" Paula's mind raced. She was trapped in the Osprey with a dying patient, surrounded by enemies, with no way out. This was Kandahar all over again. Impossible choices, no good options, just the brutal calculus of who lives and who dies. Her eyes fell on the flare gun clipped to the bulkhead. An idea formed, terrible and desperate. "Corpseman," Paula barked, "grab that flare gun and hand it to me, then take over compressions." "What? I can't." "You can. Just squeeze his heart like I'm doing. Don't stop, no matter what." The corpseman's hands replaced hers, clumsy but effective. Paula grabbed the flare gun and crawled to the door, staying low. Through the smoke and chaos, she could see a mercenary advancing with an RPG on his shoulder, setting up for a shot that would turn the Osprey into a crematorium. Paula didn't aim for the man. She aimed for his tactical vest, for the magazine pouches and grenades clipped to his chest. The flare gun kicked in her hand, and the bright red star shot across the distance like a meteor. It hit his vest dead center and stuck, burning at 3,000 degrees. The mercenary had 2 seconds to realize what was about to happen. Then his ammunition cooked off in a chain reaction that turned him into a fireball. The explosion scattered his squad, bought them precious seconds. "Now!" Paula screamed. "Get the basket down here now!" The Blackhawks' rescue basket dropped through the smoke, swaying wildly. Marines grabbed it, and together they manhandled Sterling inside, Paula climbing in with him, her hand never leaving his chest. The corpseman squeezed in beside her, still maintaining compressions when Paula's arm cramped. "Go! Go! Go!" Thorne yelled, and the winch began to pull them up. They'd risen 50 feet when the cable jammed. The basket lurched to a stop, swinging wildly in the updraft from the ravine. Paula looked down and saw mercenaries regrouping, weapons coming up. They were hanging in midair, completely exposed, and she still had her hand in Sterling's chest. "Winch is jammed," the pilot's voice crackled in her ear. "Working on it, but you're sitting ducks for at least 60 seconds. 60 seconds might as well have been an eternity. Paula saw the mercenary with the RPG, a second one, coming out of the tree line. He was setting up, taking his time, knowing they couldn't dodge. The rocket would tear through the basket and everyone in it. With her free hand, Paula drew the sidearm Thorne had clipped to her vest, a Sig Sauer P216, 15 rounds. The basket was swaying violently, the wind tearing at her, and she had to keep one hand on Sterling's heart. It was an impossible shot. She'd made impossible shots before. Paula waited for the swing, felt the rhythm of the basket's movement. She exhaled slowly, letting her body remember the training that had been drilled into her at Quantico. The mercenary lifted the RPG to his shoulder. Paula squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the ravine, and the mercenary dropped, the RPG falling from his hands. It hit the ground and detonated, taking out 2 more hostiles who were moving up behind him. The remaining mercenaries scattered.
"Winch is free," the pilot shouted. "Bringing you up." The basket jerked into motion again, rising toward the Blackhawk's belly. Paula kept her hand on Sterling's heart, kept him alive through training and stubbornness and the refusal to let General Taylor's son die on her watch. When they finally hauled her into the helicopter, her arms were shaking with exhaustion, her prosthetic leg throbbing where she'd braced against the basket's edge. "Raven Actual, Angel 6, Paula gasped into her mic. "I've got the package. He's alive, but I need an OR and I need it 20 minutes ago." "Angel 6, closest facility is Madigan Army Medical Center, 45 minutes out." "Negative," Paula's voice turned to steel. "Seattle General, 20 minutes. Tell them to prep OR1 and have Dr. Tanner standing by." "Ma'am, Seattle General isn't equipped for—" "I don't care. That's where we're going. Angel 6 out." She looked at Thorne, daring him to contradict her. He just grinned and relayed the order to the pilot. The Blackhawks set down on Seattle General's helipad like a bomb going off. Paula burst through the rooftop doors with Sterling on a gurney, her hand still in his chest, her flight suit soaked with his blood, when the hospital staff scattered in front of her like startled birds. "OR1, now!" Paula bellowed, her voice carrying the command authority of someone who'd run battlefield triage. "Where's Dr. Tanner?" They wheeled Sterling into the elevator, and when the doors opened on the surgical floor, Tanner was there. He looked pale, uncertain, but he'd put on his surgical gown. When he saw Paula, covered in blood, her hand literally inside a patient's chest, his eyes went wide. "Powell, what the hell?" "It's Commander Powell," Paula corrected, her voice flat. "And this patient has a grade 4 cardiac laceration, pericardial tamponade, and approximately 45 minutes before my arm gives out. You're going to assist me, doctor, and you're going to do exactly what I tell you." "You can't perform surgery here. You're a nurse. You're not even—" "I'm a Navy Cross recipient who's kept this kid alive through a helicopter crash, a firefight, and an aerial rescue. You're going to scrub in or you're going to get out of my way. Choose now." Tanner looked at the Marines flanking her, weapons still at the ready. He looked at Sterling's gray face. He looked at Paula's eyes, and whatever he saw there made his decision for him. "OR1 is prepped," he said quietly. "Let's move." They burst through the OR doors as a team. Paula directed traffic like a combat surgeon, calling out orders that the staff followed without question. Tanner assisted, and to his credit, his hands were steady and his ego was absent. He watched Paula work with something that looked like awe, the way she repaired the cardiac laceration with sutures so precise they looked like art, the way she cleaned and debrided the wounds with the efficiency of someone who'd done this under fire. 4 hours later, Sterling's chest was closed, his vitals were stable, and Paula finally pulled her hands from inside him for the last time. She stripped off her gloves, her arms shaking with exhaustion, and looked at Tanner across the operating table. "You did good, doctor. Better than I expected." Tanner pulled down his mask. "Where did you learn to do that? That wasn't standard surgical procedure. That was battlefield medicine, SEAL style. When there's no other option, you do what keeps them breathing." Paula headed for the door, her limp more pronounced now, her entire body screaming with exhaustion. "And that patient in bed 4? Did you find her internal bleeding?" Tanner's face flushed. "Yes, you were right. She's in surgery now. She would have died if—" He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for everything I said, everything I thought." Paula paused at the door. "Just do better, doctor. That's all any of us can do." She pushed through into the recovery area and stopped. General Cornet Taylor was standing there in his dress uniform, the stars on his shoulders catching the fluorescent light.
He was a mountain of a man, 60 years old, but still carrying himself like he could lead a charge up a hill. Behind him stood 20 Marines in full dress blues, their postures rigid and perfect. The general's eyes were red. "Commander Powell, my son. Stable. He'll need more surgery, extensive recovery, but he'll live, sir." The general's face crumpled for just a moment, relief and grief and gratitude warring across his features. Then he straightened, and his hand snapped up in a salute so crisp it could cut glass. "On behalf of the United States Marine Corps and a grateful father, I thank you for bringing my boy home." Behind him, 20 Marines saluted in perfect unison. Paula stood there in her blood-stained flight suit, her prosthetic leg aching, her body pushed beyond its limits, and felt something break open inside her chest. She returned the salute, holding it until the general dropped his hand. "He's a good kid, sir. He fought like hell to stay alive. He's got your strength. He's got your skill keeping him breathing." The general stepped forward and pulled something from his pocket, Paula's hospital ID badge, the one she dropped in Tanner's pocket. "Dr. Tanner asked me to return this to you. He said you might need it, said Seattle General would be lucky to have you back." Paula took the badge, looking at her own tired face in the ID photo. "I'm not sure I belong here anymore, sir." "Commander Powell," the general's voice softened. "Angel 6, you belong wherever you choose to be. You've earned that right 100 times over." He glanced at the Marines behind him. "But if you ever want to come back, if you ever want to trade that badge for a flight suit permanently, let me know. The Corps would be honored." Paula looked at the badge, then at the Marines standing at attention, then at the OR doors where Sterling lay recovering. She thought about Tanner's apology, about Sarah's kindness, about the way she'd felt with her hand inside Sterling's chest, fighting death and winning. She thought about the 7 years she'd spent trying to disappear, trying to be small, trying to forget who she'd been. "I think," Paula said slowly, "I need to figure out who I am now, somewhere between Angel 6 and the nurse who stocks gauze pads." The general smiled. "That's the wisest thing I've heard all day." He extended his hand. "Whatever you decide, Commander, you'll always have a place with us." Paula shook his hand, feeling the weight of honor and expectation and possibility. Then the general and his Marines filed out, leaving her alone in the hallway with her thoughts and her aching leg and the distant sound of hospital monitors keeping rhythm with living hearts. She looked down at her badge one more time, then clipped it back onto her flight suit. Somewhere in this building, patients needed care. Somewhere there were lives to save and battles to fight that didn't require bullets. And maybe, just maybe, there was a way to be both things, the warrior and the healer, the legend and the nurse, Angel 6 and Paula Powell. She started walking toward the ER, her limp steady and sure, no longer trying to hide it. It was part of her story now, part of who she was. And for the first time in 7 years, Paula Powell wasn't trying to be invisible anymore.